So let's see here who is okay. So we got a couple folks here. All right, thank you very much, Pam. Okay, we are live on Facebook. Thank you, Pam, for letting us know. We didn't know. Well, we are delighted to be here. We are the Brain Buddies, Chicago Brain Buddies. It's me, Aaron Freeman, and who are you?
I'm Peggy Mason.
Excuse me. You are Professor Peggy Mason, Professor of Neurobiology at the University of Chicago, and the what do we call you for understanding the brain? The
Neuroevangelist.
I see you're a neuroevangelist, and you have a lot of fans from your MOOC, Understanding the Brain, the Neurobiology of Everyday Life.
Okay, so let's talk Get Out.
Get Out, the Oscar award-winning movie that involves
Oscar-nominated.
Oscar-nominated, yeah. I'm sorry, Oscar-nominated movie. Yes, it involves brains and brain transplants. Yes, so this is it for those who haven't seen the movie. This is where the evil white people, which is not redundant. These are the evil white people, and they go and they collect Negroes who have qualities that they want, and they transplant the white people's brains into the Negro's body. Is that fair?
Yeah, and okay. So this is a weird white liberal family that's recruiting these black people into their lair. And I mean, we are going to give away a lot, so I'm really sorry.
Yeah, spoiler alert!
Yeah, spoiler alert, a big time. But the reason I wanted to talk about this with Aaron is two reasons. One, it's got some neurobiology, and there's an individual trying to do a body transplant, which is essentially what this is. And we'll talk about that. And also because it's just so it's so interesting that I have a friend who's she's very proud African American who I was telling Aaron won't watch NFL because of their unfair treatment of Colin Kaepernick. And she went and saw this movie, which before I had seen it, all I knew was that, we're killing these black people by taking their brains and putting it into, taking out their brains and putting in a white person's brain. And I thought that was really weird. And she said, "Oh, I loved it. I saw it 3 times." I had to see it. And so we'll start by talking about the transplant piece.
Right. So it looked to me like, I mean, they took off the top of the brain donor's head, or the body purchaser's head. Really, he purchased a new body, which
is how that it is normally done in the morgue. You take off the calvarium this way so that you can put it back together, and a person can then be put into a viewing, because it's all easily hideable by the hair.
Yeah.
So that is the typical way that you would take out a brain.
And then, just for the sake of argument, well, why would you do this? You would do this if you have to do brain surgery.
No, I mean, this is for a dead person taking out a brain. There is no brain surgery that involves taking out a brain. This is a movie.
Well, but there is brain surgery that involves popping off the top of the skull.
Absolutely, you have to take off various pieces of the skull depending on how much of this brain you have to have access to. Typically, not that big for brain surgery.
All right, so now
typically a small part.
All right, so when the white people's brains are taken out and put into the Negro, it looks like the premise is that the white people maintain their personalities and their identities essentially. Although there's apparently some sort of residual personality of the Negroes who can occasionally rise up when a photo flash comes and say, "Get out!"
Right. Not much.
No, but there was that one.
Yeah.
So
so what's right about that is that, let's say that all the technical stuff could happen, which it can't. Okay, not realistic, but okay. Let's just go with, this is a movie, it's fiction.
Okay.
Let's say you could put person A's brain into person B. What face is person B face is gonna result? Well, the face is gonna come from the brain, not from the muscles, and that they get right. So these people act white They act white because they have a white person's brain. They no longer, you see one person before he was, before the surgery and after, because he was taken off the street, and the way he acts after the surgery is not the way he acted before the surgery. The way his facial expressions go is not the same. It goes with the brain. And that's correct, because our facial expressions are expressions of our nervous system.
See, now, one of the, this is slightly off the point, but one of the things that was the reason that people like this movie, I think, is that it does do a pretty good job of building tension and suspense. You know, and I'm just.
I mean, I don't even like horror movies, and I was riveted. I watched the whole thing. I was never bored. I was very uncomfortable and a lot of moments, but I was never bored, and I, you know, and it had some humor in it.
Yes. It did. Well, but let me say, Stan, if you were going to do it, okay, if you were going to do it, how conceivably could you do it? For one thing, it appears that they considered that there's some part of the brain wherein your personality will remain intact.
Well, the idea that they take out a piece of the brain but not the whole brain, that's completely ridiculous. There's just no way you could take out the frontal. You know, you could make a cut and then shove it onto somebody else's brain and expect that any meaningful connections would result.
They take out hearts, they take out lungs, they put them back in. What?
Okay, no, but you're saying make a section a straight section through the brain. Straight section is a non-meaningful section. Doesn't cut along.
Follow the natural geography.
It doesn't follow the natural geography. Exactly right. And so, you know, it just couldn't. It couldn't be hooked up. So what they're suggesting, and what is, you know, not in the realm of possibility, but within 5 million miles of the realm of possibility, would be that you take out the whole brain and put the whole brain in somebody else's cranium. Now, for that to happen, you have to do 2 things. You have to hook. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, and you'd have to hook up each one of those cranial nerves. That's 24 hookups.
Everybody has an acronym for memorizing the cranial nerves. The taste and feel. There's not. There's
I don't know the acronym. I know
not acronym, but a mnemonic.
I don't know the mnemonic. I just know them.
Okay, you just know.
So for example, there's optic nerve. There's an olfactory nerve.
Right.
There's a nerve that brings sensation into the from the face. There's also one that brings motor expression out to the
trigeminal nerve. Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different nerves. There's 12 pairs, and they all have to be hooked up.
Anybody who has any questions for Peggy or comments about the movie, we are the Chicago Brain Buddies, sponsored by the Chicago Society for Neuroscience. We love the Chicago Society for Neuroscience. But if you have questions you'd like to ask Peggy, you can type them in. We would love to hear from you. She would love, I don't like to speak for Peggy, but I think I can, that you would love to answer any questions anyone might have. Have you seen the movie? Donna, have you seen the movie? Pam, have you seen the movie? We don't know quite who else is out here, who else is watching, but if you can let us know you're here, type something in there. We'll see if you're there. If you've seen the movie or have seen any other. Now, by the way, so in the absolute worst episode of Star Trek ever created was Spock's brain. Oh, you haven't seen it? Okay. Well, it's a
I love Spock.
Okay, but did you ever see Spock's brain?
Spock. I've seen everything.
Okay. It's okay, but do you remember Spock's brain?
No.
Oh, it was terrible. So they took Spock's brain out.
Okay.
They took his brain out, and they put like some remote control unit inside his head. And he walks around, and there's I don't know who it is, the McCoy or somebody walks around with a little like Nintendo box. They're controlling Spock and having him walk around. I am going to know it is not logic. But it was really just another bad example of brain transplant.
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons we were interested in the neurobiology of this, as well as the sociology, why do people like this movie? But also, there's a lot of neurobiology because there happens to be a person, I think his name is Italo Calvino.
Ah, right.
So Italo Calvino is a pretty rogue neurosurgeon who has the idea that he is going to transplant a body onto a person who has a disease such as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
And he's transplanted a human head.
No, he has done work on a cadaver. He has not transplanted. He has not done anything.
It was alive. Did I say alive? Did you hear me say alive?
No, we're not gonna call that a transplant.
Okay, all right.
He has practiced his insanity on cadavers. And he thinks that not only, I mean, after you hook up the cranial nerves, you also have to hook up the brain to the spinal cord. And that, he has some idea that he can do that. As people may know, if you have a spinal cord injury, it's the same problem, but a little bit more controlled because you're cutting it. So he has this idea that he can put these people into a very cold environment. So they're pretty hypothermic, slow down all the damage, cut the spinal cord from the donor, cut the spinal cord from the recipient, and transplant the head onto the body of the donor. So you transplant the donor's body onto the head of the recipient, I should say. Yeah. So this is a head transplant. A body transplant. And no one believes that this is going to work. That functional connections will form sufficient to actually do anything that the person can't already do.
But the one of the problems I assume is the sheer number of axons that come out of the brain and go down the spinal cord. There's just a mind-blowing number, and the possibilities of something going wrong are so astronomical. I guess that's probably true about all of our biological functions.
But also, what we've known for hundreds of years is that the peripheral nervous system regenerates to a certain degree. So you damage a peripheral nerve, and the peripheral nerve can recover. Even if you slice it, the axons will grow across that slice. When that happens in the central nervous system, not so much. And that's why spinal cord injury is such a devastating problem, because the axons can't grow across that cut. And so that's a fundamental difference between the central nervous system and all other organs, including the peripheral nervous system, including if you take a piece of liver, you can transplant a piece of liver to a person. They don't have to do the whole liver.
Right.
So
if you can do a piece of a liver, why can't you do a piece of a brain like in the movie?
Well, as I said, you can't, because these axons don't like that. They don't go across injuries.
Now, would you ever?
That's a fundamental difference.
Now, you're a young woman now, but in another 20 years, in theory, brain transplants or body transplants could be possible. I really don't think so. And that's just getting at the practical. I don't think it's possible. Ever.
Not before we destroy the earth, probably. So, which is pretty limited time.
You mean not this week?
But in addition, I find it unethical, and I think that it's a little bit too much brain in the vat. So this idea that we are just our brains. If we're just our brains, then all you need is a brain in a vat. But that's probably not the case. I think that what we actually like is we like to have a brain that goes with our body. We care a lot about our body. We do things to our body. We want to have the body that matches our brain. People become transgendered because they don't like there's a mismatch. And people decorate their body. They get haircuts, they get tattoos, they get all sorts of things people do. People diet. People care about their bodies. There's not this just sort of indifference to what your body is. And so there's a very fundamental ethical problem with just saying, oh, we'll just give you a body that you won't reject. We're just going to do it on immune basis.
If Stephen Hawking's brain could be put into a body that would allow him to walk around and hug his kids, come on, who wouldn't want to do that? Donna, wouldn't you like anybody?
I don't know. I would ask him, would he do it?
Why wouldn't he? Why in the world wouldn't you do that?
Well, let's say if he gets put into the body of a I don't know, a 15-year-old Chinese girl. Does he want that? I don't know. No, I mean, there has to be some kind of a mesh. The body and the brain. I used to be such a brain chauvinist that I thought, oh, the brain is the only thing that matters. But once I took myself down this path of thinking about what Italo Calvino is doing with these body transplants or these proposed body transplants, I realized, no, body and brain actually go together. Body's pretty darn important.
But there have been a lot of studies and injuries to brains that have caused changes in personality that have caused people to think that personality is intricately, I won't talk about Gage, but famously, everybody who's ever taken Psych 101 knows about Phineas Gage. But there have been lots of people who when there's an amygdala disorder, are not able to recognize their wives and children.
Wifey, yeah.
What is it called? A Crabgrass syndrome.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Crabgrass, and so there is some real clinical justification for believing that much personality is in the gray matter. No.
Oh, I don't dispute that for a second. I just think that the body is also important, and just saying that, okay, your body doesn't work, you get a new body, that's problematic. So let's say you match for sex, or you match for age, do you match for race? I mean, what's ethical and what's not ethical? Looks like a disaster to me.
Now Donna says that it comes down to,
but don't touch my body brain match, okay? Don't mess with it.
Donna says it comes down to identity. We are, as Peggy says, both brain and body. My partner was severe. Oh, you had a partner who was severely brain injured. And was that? I'm curious, Donna, that when your partner was injured, did their personality appear to change with that brain injury? Now, I'm guessing that it did. I'm guessing that a brain injury. I mean, I guess it depends on where the brain is, or what part of the brain where the injury is, right? Whether or not it affects.
I can't hear the comment.
Can you see that she is commenting?
I can't see it either. Why don't you repeat it? Why don't you repeat it?
Donna, our good buddy Donna says that Donna Wilson Wolf says that it comes down to identity. We are, as Peggy says, both brain and body. My partner was severely brain injured, and then I asked if the partner's personality changed, and Donna says yes, it did. Yes, it did. And before I finished, I'm not quite sure what that means, but the personality did change with the brain injury. Yeah. And again, that's not unusual. Although there are cases like when we talk in your class, the Understanding the Brain, the Neurobiology of Everyday Life, which I'm sure that the Chicago Society for Neuroscience wants everyone to watch. Excuse me. But in that, you start out talking about the diving bell and the butterfly. So someone who had a severe spinal injury, but their personality was pretty much intact.
No, I think he actually had a pontine injury. So so this head transplant wouldn't, or the body transplant wouldn't work for him to begin with. Okay, it's too far low. It's below his injury, so that wouldn't work. And in ALS, it actually wouldn't work because the degeneration also affects the upper motor control centers. So they would be.
So you have to have the right.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's a spinal cord injury deal.
Oh, Nadana says that there were dramatic changes in the personality, as with most TBI.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, when air hits the brain. There's a great book called When Air Hits the Brain by Frank Velasic or something, which is a great book by a neurosurgeon talking about how things really change once you open up the skull, which is not meant to be opened up, by the way.
But again, this is to support the ridiculous assertion in the movie Get Out that personality does. I mean, that you perhaps were right as a brain chauvinist, that huge chunks of personality do rest just specifically within the gray matter.
Right.
And that's and so is it common that personality changes occur with traumatic brain injury?
Absolutely.
Okay. Absolutely.
So right. So let's let people go, but also talk a little bit about why is this so popular?
Yeah, I mean, I must say that I thought it was a good movie. I was not overwhelmed by it. It was no Black Panther.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, but it was no Black Panther. But I mean, it was a. I think though that a part of the game, and this really almost reminds me of some of Your Rats, that it's fun to see phenotypic characteristics that look familiar on the screen. And so that with Your Rats, the albino rats would not rescue a black-caped rat until a black-caped rat became familiar to them. And then that empathy that you write about so eloquently in your work, that empathy can kick in, and more so when you see, phenotypic characteristics that you recognize. And I think that there are relatively few movies that feature the predicament of Negroes in Hollywood films. And I assume that that's part of the appeal of it. I assume.
I mean, I think a lot of the appeal, it reminds me kind of an updated version of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner from the flip side, right? So it as with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the hypocrisy of white liberalism is revealed.
Well, they say that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So this guy was invited to be the dinner menu, and I suppose that's true. I mean, but these guys. Well, I mean, the guy who bought the hero's brain, the hero's body, the white guy, the evil white guy, who was a blind photographer, and the hero was a photographer, and he wanted to be able to. So he wanted to be able to.
Blind art dealer.
Oh, blind art dealer. That's right.
Art dealer dealing in photography.
And he wanted
very ironic, very funny.
Yeah, and he wanted to be able to see through the eyes of this photographer.
Depending on, most likely he wouldn't have been, because most likely his problem was out in the retina, and that would not have been solved by any brain, somebody else's brain.
Well, I thought the retina was a part of the brain.
No, the retina is part of the central nervous system. But it sits outside of the cranium.
Yes. Yeah, I know, really, yes. I know.
Just taking out the brain, which is just the part that's in the cranium. Yes. So there's no retina, there's no retina switching from one body to another. So he's not seeing. I can tell you that.
They did not say that the procedure didn't include a retinal transplant.
It didn't. From his taking off the top. That's not how you would get to the retina.
Well,
not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Even in the implausible land that we're talking about, that's even more implausible.
Well, okay. So, as a white person, did you feel that did you feel any sense of connection to those evil white people because they were just white people? Did you feel guilty for all the sins of the various white people?
I felt embarrassed by them.
Really?
I felt I cringed at their idiocy. Yeah. And but I identified with the main character who's a black man. I cared, and his friend, who I loved, of course. His friend.
Oh yeah, the friend was great.
I think Rod Wilson is the name of the character of the friend.
We are TSA. We handled
TSA. I can do investigation. I'm with TSA.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it was a fun movie. It was really it follows in along. There's a long series, a long line of movies about brain transplants, movies and stories about brain transplants. Although Frankenstein wasn't
Donovan's Brain. That's another one.
I
recently saw that one. That was great.
What was the premise?
Yeah, I'm gonna butcher it because I didn't see it recently enough, and I have a bad memory. But we should talk about Donovan's Brain one day.
All right. But I think we have covered the material that we wanted to cover today.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank Donna and thank the other folks who joined in with the conversation. Thank you very much for contributing. Thank you for watching. We are Chicago Brain Buddies. I'm Aaron Freeman, and that is the fabulous Professor Peggy Mason, as you see there. And so what do you say? We'll do this next Thursday at 2:00.
Sure.
All right.
See you all then.
For watching, you guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.